Welcome to Solo Journeys podcast, where every journey begins with a single step. And today I would like to remind you that some journeys don't start with a plan, they start with a feeling. In today's episode of Solo Journeys, I'm speaking with a music composer whose path led her from Bailey Studios to creating a symphony inspired by the moons of our solar system in collaboration with NASA scientists. Welcome, Amanda. Could you please introduce yourself?
Firstly, thank you so much for having me on the show. Solo Journey, it seems so fitting to the role of a composer. So much of our time is spent in the solo mode. I started playing when I was 2.5 years old. And in my early 20s, I started to get very curious about, well, if I've been spending the last 2 decades playing everyone else's music, how about I try and write my own? So I did, and I started in ballet studios, and then everything evolved from there really into composing for the orchestra and seeing how infatuated I was with putting music with emotional storytelling, which is really what film composers' role is.
Maybe you can tell us more about your work, share with us what are your dearest projects.
The thing that brings me the greatest joy about being a film composer is that of the orchestra. I love working with the colours of an orchestra and the texture. It is just my happy place. And so I have to say my most exciting project to date has been the Moons Symphony, an idea that just came to me out of the blue. It was like a lightning bolt the day that it arrived. For that particular idea, I was fortunate position of playing the role of director, playing the role of, casting director, the script writer, and I just got to wear all these beautiful hats that otherwise I hadn't been able to access until this idea was shown to me.
How did you manage to involve NASA into this project?
I've often asked that question, as you can imagine. And I would give this answer. I've had this, big white butcher paper and mapped out all this plan for the Moons Symphony. Absolutely did not start like that at all. I mean, I just saw it absolutely did not. It was just so serendipitous the way the chain of events just came around every chapter of the evolution of this project. And it really just started out, that name of the piano concerto was Crossing of the Crescent Moon. So I've just, like many people, I have a very special relationship with the moon. And so I'm like, I'm going to write a piano concerto about it. I was doing some research about the spiritual and historical significance of full moons, etc., and crescent moons. And I stumbled across this website which said 10 of the weirdest moons of our outer solar system, distant worlds that vast and varied. And I thought, oh my God, there's more moons I could be writing music for. First thing that came to my mind was these moons need music. And the very next thing that came to me was these moons need emotion. I felt a little bit sad for them. I mean, it sounds weird, but the title of the article was 10 of the weirdest moons of the solar system. I'm like, they're not weird. I just felt like I had to come in and defend them, and somehow I'm like, I'll show them. Like, I'll create this beautiful music for you guys. I knew as a film composer the power of music. I know how powerful it is when you blend it with a story. I can help you guys. I can bring your stories to a much wider audience on planet Earth. I'm pretty sure I can. That's really how the project started. The whole NASA planetary scientist connection really sort of came quickly after. I wasn't expecting to put a choir into the symphony. And when I started researching the moons, I started recognizing there was a lot of science attached to their worlds and coming up against a lot of inconsistencies. And I turned to my husband at one point, getting a bit frustrated by it all. I said, you know what? I just need to speak to a moon specialist. I came across a particular character, I would have to say, back then, and I'm like, who is this? He was talking about one of the moons I had identified I really wanted to write music for. He's from NASA. I thought, I'm just going to write to him. I'm going to tell him about my moons mission. I'm going to ask whether I can Skype with him to help try and anchor the scientific truths of these moons rather than bumping into this inconsistency. And so I just thought nothing of it. I'm just going to write to him, see what he says. And I didn't think I would hear back from him. And 7 days later, I got an email saying, Amanda, your project sounds interesting. I'd be very happy to Skype with you. And so we did about a month later and talked about the characteristics of this particular moon, Europa. And he was giving me sort of like a mission briefing about where the status of their project development was, which was just so invigorating. And I think about halfway through our conversation together, he said to me, Amanda, I think the scientists would be really interested in what you're doing. I said, really? He said, oh, yes, I think they'd be very interested. I'm like, Hmm. And so he went to one of his colleagues, Dr. Linda Spilker, who at that point was the planetary lead scientist for the Cassini mission that went out to Saturn, leading this big mission, and shared my mission with her, and she invited me to come to NASA in Los Angeles, present to the Cassini scientists that same year. So about 4 months later, my husband and I were on a flight to Los Angeles, and there I was presenting to the very scientists that were inspiring this Moon Symphony, and yeah, it just snowballed from there. I met an awesome team of scientists and just became captivated by what they were doing. And so that's how the science element really got underway.
That's interesting that science is still interested in emotional part in the art. It's something new for me.
Well, you're not the first person to say that. And I have to say, you would be so surprised at how invested they are in art and music and of course their passion for what they do. Beautiful synergy of worlds to be wrapped in, and there's just so many other layers that I could go into, but the passion was there right from the start from my observations.
You mentioned one moon is called
Europa.
Europa. You mentioned only one moon. How many moons are
Yes.
there? Why we are talking a little bit more about Europa?
There's lots of reasons why we talk about Europa, partly because the first scientist that came in and was supporting the mission was Dr. Bob Pappalardo, who is lead scientist for the Europa Clipper mission, which just launched to Jupiter last year. It's been a 2-decade mission in the making. And so that's sort of how the story starts, because it starts with Dr. Bob Pappalardo, who then introduced me to Linda Spilker and so forth. So that's why I talk about Europa. But the other really cool thing your listeners might want to know about Europa is the reason why they've sent this billion-dollar mission to Europa is because they have very strong evidence to feel confident that there is a subsurface ocean underneath Europa which could host microbial life. So we could be seeing a moon that hosts a second genesis of life out there on a moon of Jupiter. There are 7 moons. The first 6 moons are the scientific data collected by the space probes that convey the stories of these distant worlds. And the 7th moon is about the emotional data from the hearts of astronauts, because the 7th movement takes place on Earth's moon, where we all stand on its surface looking down onto our planet from this different perspective of our Earth planet that we share that does gift us life. And so that's really the journey that the Moon Symphony takes us all on, and that's pretty much the synopsis.
Which one of the moons you felt more connection with?
Miranda. So she's one of the most distant moons that we would travel to in the Moon Symphony, a moon of Uranus. Very, very far away from planet Earth. And gosh, so when I was writing her music, she's the most tortured terrain in all of the moons of the outer solar system. She's often called the Frankenstein of the solar system because her world has been burnt, beaten, thrashed, and scolded, and she tells a brutal past from her surface. And Voyager was the only spacecraft that ever has visited Miranda, but got some incredible footage from its one and only encounter. And so I was using that NASA footage to help craft her music, and it's very eerie. It's very compelling, her world. And so translating this into music, I wanted her story to be the most dramatic because her landscape is the most dramatic, and there's all sorts of other things that serendipitously line up with her being discovered as well. But so I knew all this backstory anyway, which was even more emotional for me as I was crafting her world. And something started feeling really uneasy with me. Something wasn't feeling right with the project. And I remember saying to my husband, like, just can't put my finger on it. Something feels missing. And I think this went on for about 2 weeks. And then one day when I was in the depths of composing Miranda's music, I was like literally so overwhelmed by what was coming through and what I was crafting and the drama of it all, and just felt like literally scared. Beam me back to planet Earth, like just get me out of this hellhole. Like it was so weird. It was just like zapped back in my studio chair, and I'm like, oh my God, I know what's missing. And I literally just turned my head up and I went, Earth's moon, we need to put Earth's moon in this story, because we have life here on this planet. We've got this incredible existence and home. We're out in the solar system. There's none of that going on. And so I knew that the seventh movement story had to be about reverence, the gift of planet Earth told from the perspective of our moon. And so Miranda's story led me to that final piece of the puzzle. It's just so affectionate towards her in her story and for gifting me that insight.
Absolutely fascinating. And now I'm asking myself, how can one transfer scientific data into emotional music? What is the process behind? How did you do that?
If I've been asked to compose music for a movie, I'll read the script religiously, and I will not go anywhere near my music studio until I penetrated the stories, the characters, the emotional arc. Like, all of those things are so important to me. And I know that once I've got a grip on it, I absolutely know what to do with music. And it's something that I had just always stepped into so solidly with my incubation period and my process composing whatever assignment I was given, that I absolutely knew that when I came to these moons and the science, I just approached it with that exact same template. And so therefore the process is, for me, it's not that it was easy, but it was just a formula that I knew worked for me anyway. And that was why I knew to extract the drama and the science. For instance, I wouldn't start composing the music until I'd done all the scientific research. And that could take up to 1 to 3 months of 7, 8 days, just, researching as much as I can until I felt I had enough information to go and produce a nice movement to reflect that world that I was trying to share with everyone else and amplify their story through music.
Was there a moment during the creation of the symphony when you felt uncertain or overwhelmed or lost? And how did you overcome it?
The thing with my approach is that the music has to resonate with me. It has to move me. It has to do something inside of me and emotionally, because I just one of these people, well, why bother then? If you're not moved by your music, why would you bother sharing it with anyone else? And so I've always been committed to, it has to move me first, and then hopefully it resonates with everyone else. So I was on my third moon, and I was writing for Titan, and there was a lot of science on that moon too. So that was a tricky one to get into because I had this mountain of science. I'm like, okay, I was ready to do that phase. I think it was about 3 months after the scientific research, and then 8 hours a day in the music studio just composing. And I remember by the 7th day I was playing a portion. I think I'd spent, I don't know how many minutes of music, maybe it was 3 minutes, I don't know, but I played a portion to my husband, and I'm like, I don't like this at all. I'm scrapping everything. It's not resonating with me. So I literally scrapped 7 days, 8 hours a day working on this moon. And I'm like, nope. I'm starting again. Our compass, our inner compass, if we're tuned into it, which I believe I am, it's going to tell me yes or no. And it was definitely saying no. So I'm just like, I've got to obey that inner compass, and I'm not feeling it. And so it was a case of really listening to that intuitive voice and the gut feeling, and honoring the process and trusting that something else will come from it, and knowing that, the week's work of scrapped whatever music, something better will hopefully morph through the experience. So it's really having faith and trusting the process.
In the process, when you're still in the middle and you don't know when you finish, and then you have sometimes this lows, and I think it's totally normal to have it in the working process. Sometimes I can ask myself, why am I doing that?
Another way that I would overlap another word is, just not quite sure about what the next step is. Lull. I would say lull rather than a low. I'd say lull, because I really wanted the experience to be very elevated, and because I wanted that vibration to really penetrate everyone else who came into contact with it. So I would never get depressed about anything, or I always want to make sure that my mind, body and spirit was really vibrating a frequency that was just joyful and curious. And my lulls, when they were like that, was very simple process. I would go and meditate for 20 minutes in my studio, and I'll go, right, you just need to take a break. You just to put the music aside, go and lie, relax the mind for 20 minutes. That's all I gave myself. And then just go back into it and see what comes. But I never wanted to panic. I never wanted to have those vibrations. We can be so thankful for the tools of meditation and, crystal therapy and all those beautiful natural minerals we have around us, and, crystal gemstone, and associating that with a particular moon. So when I was meditating with that energy as well, to sort of keep the energy uplifted and yet grounded as well. So there were some of my tools that I really relied on.
It's a very holistic way. You emotionally connect to the subject. You also learn a lot about it, whatever is possible to learn.
It was just something that I felt so committed to and knew that I could potentially make a difference to expose their worlds to other people on planet Earth. I just wanted to make that my mission because I felt that other people needed to know about the extraordinary neighborhood that we are sharing in the solar system, and these worlds are compelling, and what they're being able to find out from these space missions is absolutely riveting. And so I used my skills and craft as a film composer to do something really special, but especially building in the emotion around it, because I think that even has a way to hopefully uplift and inspire and motivate other people to feel really excited about how amazing it is to be a human being on this planet Earth when, they've sent these incredible missions out there. There's no sign of life, at least so far. And here we are gifted with this planet. I mean, say no more.
Were there some interesting learnings about working with NASA, something surprising or something unexpected, some fun facts?
There is a lot. Well, actually, where that will be answered a lot of detail is in one of my programs that I won't go into too much detail because I want to reserve it for the program itself. But I would love to say, just as top of mind right now, like I said, there's so many overlaps with the world of a musician and composer, and working with scientists, but particularly planetary scientists who are not only building these spacecrafts to go out there, but they're also reading the data that come from their worlds. And what I find so synergistic is the timescales of these missions to the outer solar system take a long time to not only put together but to actually get the spacecraft there. Patience has to be a very big element of not only their world but also the world of a composer and a musician. I mean, it takes decades to perfect our crafts, and as someone, I think a scientist said once, you have to be obsessed with this science, planetary science, because you're in it for such a long time. And, while they would wait for their missions to go out there, for instance, like Dr. Linda Spielker went and finished her doctorate, and, they're just waiting for the missions to go out there. So there's such a large time scale that's involved. And but there is as a composer and a musician as well. And then when I was putting the symphony together and feeling quite overwhelmed about all the detail that requires, for 96, musicians to play, a full symphony orchestra and a choir on top of that, some of the decisions just get so fatiguing after a while. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, it's just like, I used to say to my sister, it's literally like making decisions, picking up a grain of sand, examining it, and then putting it back down, and then picking up another grain of sand. I mean, this is the sort of detail that's involved in symphonic writing of this, vast project. And then, of course, all the science that goes into it as well. But I remember when I was becoming very fatigued, and in those moments, though, I knew that the Europa Clipper spacecraft was getting built, and I literally just laid my mind thinking about how meticulous the team were being about all the detail that had to go into the mission, building, planning, all the science instruments. And I just went, I'm just building a symphonic spacecraft. That's all I'm doing here. And so I just found great comfort and reassurance that their mission and my mission just happened to overlap and parallel. And I just really blended my heart and mind, and it softened the experience by just going, we're all in this together. Like, this is just, it's tricky, but it's tricky on their side, it's tricky on my side, but that's why we love what we do. And I found that was really very cool to be able to build those worlds and blend them together.
Very cool, positive approach. I love it. And Amanda, what are the plans, projects that you're working on or planning?
I always knew that as soon as I stumbled across the science, I absolutely wanted to build out a cinematic educational program that teaches students and lifelong learners about the outer solar system, but rather than driven through data to explain the scientific concepts, The difference here is it's driven by a symphonic cinematic soundtrack that takes students through a very multi-dimensional, multi-sensory excursion to experience the science of these moons. And it's called my Lunar program. That stands for Learning Under New Artistic Regimes. I'll be launching the first of 7 modules next February. It's writing 7 symphonies on top of the symphony itself. It's a big project, but you used the word holistic before. That's exactly what I want this experience to be. I believe is the first dedicated symphonic scientific learning journey that's ever been crafted on the planet, which is why I'm so committed to making sure that my students that have such a wonderful, powerful experience and can explore science through this emotive language of music. Yeah, I'm really excited to see how other people resonate with it as well.
I wish you all the luck and patience as well. If you would wish something to the audience, to the listeners out there, what would it be? One message?
You know, when life feels a little bit confronting or confusing, or you don't know quite where to pivot, I'm one of these people that say, you know, maybe just try and not looking at a situation as good or bad. Just keeping neutral about it might be just a nice way for you to sort of approach the situation while you're figuring things out, because often the good stuff ends up being a bit dicey and the bad stuff ends up being brilliant, you know, half the time. So, you know, I just think if we just take this neutral approach and just sort of keep our emotions sort of, you know, at bay and just let the universe come in and do its thing and just sort of just keep, I just feel that is like a method that I like to employ pretty much on a daily basis, because it's a nice way to live out each day.
Inspiring and interesting story.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me and having this beautiful conversation. It's really been awesome sharing this journey with you, the solo journey, special day of the year, our last full moon, supermoon.
Nice to celebrate together.
Absolutely, I couldn't have said that better.
All the musical pieces you hear in this episode are the parts of the Moons Symphony by Amanda Lee Falkenberg. With her story, Amanda reminded me that solo journeys aren't linear. They are shaped by pauses, restarts, and learning to listen deeply to what feels true. I would also like to add patience. Share your biggest takeaways with me on Instagram, tag me or message me. I'm always responsive. And thank you for listening and for honoring your own solo journeys. From Sasha, with love.